Howdy, y'all. This is Market Explainer, America's #1 business news podcast. What we do every week on this show, we break down 4 important business news stories. We are going to move on to our next segment, but before that, I want to tell you about Big Man Gear. Big Man Gear is this guy's idea of a funny merch brand. You can go to bigmangear.com. It is printed and shipped by Amazon Prime. Jeff Bezos himself sneezes on everything. You can go to bigmangear.com today and get a shirt. There's some funny stuff up there, folks. Big Man rarely gets me to laugh or chuckle. Some of them pretty good.
Thank you.
Next story, just throwing this out there. It's a fact. It's undeniable at this point. The American conglomerate is dead.
No, it's not. This is, again, a Danny-ism.
Yeah. So GE, General Electric, will be splitting into 3 separate companies. Before Big Man goes on this is a Danny saying, tell you what. I think Forbes or Fortune, I want to say was one of those, put out a YouTube video a little after we put this in our show notes, but our show got delayed because of the holiday. One of the experts, in quotes, that they brought in to talk about it said exactly what I said after I wrote the headline that it's dead, that the iconic American conglomerate is over. Now, I think that I don't think this means that vertical integration is dead. I think that vertical integration still is economically prudent. I just think when you have a company like GE that makes refrigerators and jet engines, I don't think that they work. I don't think that makes sense at the same time. You know?
Well, look, and Danny is right. I do have a tendency to have a different company. I have a different thought process. This is actually about GE split in the same week. Johnson said it was splitting, right? So when Danny says a conglomerate is dead, it's not. Everything in business ebbs and flows. That's just the way it is. So the conglomerate's not dead. Malls are not dead. They ebb and flow. So they ebb and they will literally they could all be Amazon fulfillment centers tomorrow. That makes them not dead. It's the ebb and flow of business. Nothing stays the same. In this case, you've got GE, a company that GE has been around for 100 and something years, folks. Okay, it's been around a long time.
Big Man.
Yeah, exactly. So I was around its creation, help, cut that original, ribbon. Anyway, so like 1892, right? So over 100 years. And it really didn't hit its stride, which is crazy to say, until 80 years into that, right? The late 70s and 80s, GE became what we consider a household name, meaning they made everything from toasters, they had banks, they had everything and anything. They made parts for NASA.
Right. Jack Welch's era. Jack Welch is kind of the CEO that kind of made it into what we think of GE. Banks, the stupid, they have an insurance company. And here's the other thing I just want to point out. Okay. People have suggested, hey, I don't know, that GE, that part of this breakup, that splitting into 3 separate, I think these are all going to be publicly traded companies.
Yes.
Has a little something to do with the fact that GE has engaged in aggressive, perhaps, Enron-style accounting, ?
Okay, so...
And that, and that I think that I don't want to be misquoting here, but Pershing Square's guy, I always forget his name, Bill Ackman, actually. So boring to listen to, but if you listen to the content of what he's saying, very interesting. But as a human being, he's boring. Has been saying this since like 2003 or something. Like, hey, their accounting doesn't make any sense.
Well, okay, you shouldn't mention Enron and GE in the same token. There's different things, right? So part of diversification, when you're a single company, and look, this happens in small business every day, right? Meaning that I'm a small business, or I own 2 or 3 small businesses, and one of them's doing really well and the other 2 aren't doing great. I shuffle some money around to make sure that these get supported and that one makes a little less money. That happens in small business every day. conglomerates, as you say, have been doing this for decades as well.
Correct.
I have a very yeah, exactly. The diversification, right? I have a product that does really well. It can cover for the cost of some other products that don't. Now, that was the thinking in the 70s and 80s and 90s as GE and Johnson & Johnson and all these other people that did a bunch of different things. That was their idea, was I'm going to be able to easily, if a product doesn't survive or a recall or whatever, I can compensate for that very easily. What they've learned, however, is that also increases their ability. In GE's case, they had a bank, right? Financial institution that was highly leveraged into what became the subprime market in the 2008, 2009, 2010 market, right? So, and you have a company that is tied in with everything that unfortunately just goes, right, completely belly up, by the way, right?
Right.
So, and that...
Hey, in the 80s and 90s, freaking Ford owned unbelievable amounts of different car companies.
Well, exactly.
Jaguar, Land Rover. The freaking Aston, as a car guy, it's extremely hilarious to see people with these little older, like 90s, early 2000s Aston Martins, and realize that they have two Taurus engines pushed together to make it V12. Aston Martin, it's like you got two Ford Taurus engines.
They were making up names of manufacturing lines, right? They were making up names that were the same thing, just had a different name on it, right? So that they could brand it differently and whatever. But again, they thought it was this diversification. It was literally the decade of diversification to get your toes into all these things, because they believed at the time, and this is what I'm saying about ebbs and flows about business, because business, like science, it should, as new information comes in, you should change how you think. It might change your business model, right? And the idea at the time was diversification was good. Having your toes in a lot of different things mitigated loss. What we found out is, while that's a great low-level thinking, that in big business, it increases your liability exponentially, right? So in Johnson & Johnson's case, which is a little weird, and I bring this up, Johnson & Johnson is splitting into different companies as well. Johnson & Johnson hit its own snag with one of its most popular items in history being its baby powder. There was a unfortunate... there was something in their baby powder that was causing problems. It's gotten sued at a class action lawsuit, which, for whatever reason, perfectly legal. Johnson & Johnson was able to create a third-party shell company that now has all of that bankruptcy liability attached to it from its lawsuit, and that lawsuit is currently in Chapter 11. So...
That's odd how they did that. Can I do that? Can I shift my liability from my profitable entity into a newly existing, like newly manufactured? I mean, that's great. That's legal.
That is apparently legal and it is done. So
I'm going to be doing that all the time.
I mean, it was only tied to, ovarian cancer and different kinds of cancers and stuff like that. But Johnson & Johnson no longer has the liability of that and is splitting into these new companies. So
I remember something sorry to interrupt you, but I'm more important than you are.
Sure.
Yeah. It reminds me of when General Motors went bankrupt back during the crash of 2008, during the great financial crisis. And I remember that someone brought a lawsuit, and the General Motors came back in court. They sided with General Motors.
Well, it was sued by shareholders like me. I was a shareholder in the original GM, and then when GM came out the other side as a brand new company, as new GM, owning all of what GM owns, all of the manufacturing plants with the same employees, the same everything, didn't even have to come out the other side as a new company name, just GM, and all of the liabilities of the old company go into bankruptcy. They essentially did the Johnson & Johnson thing, and the shareholders like me got $0 for their shares.
Yeah. That was hilarious to me that General Motors said, no, that's old GM. We're new GM. You got a problem with your airbags? Good luck, pal. That's old GM. We don't care.
Well, so they're splitting up. Look, Facebook did this a couple of weeks ago, right? Where Facebook now is a subsidiary of Meta, and so all of these companies follow suit in this way because in this case, like one of GE's companies is going to be GE Power, which is going to house their renewable energy research and development and all these different kinds of things. If for whatever reason that company just falls apart, then it just falls apart. It will have no bearing on the other legs of what ultimately will be the GE universe.
Think of GE and Johnson & Johnson as blocks of cheese, and you've cut the cheese in different sections. And you put some of it in the fridge and you leave some out for the guests. Now, if the cheese you left out for the guests gets moldy, fine. Put 3 other blocks. But this makes a lot of sense, especially in the context of Thanksgiving, cutting up the cheese. But anyways, I just think that this proves one thing is that going forward, being lean, being flexible, and being hyper-focused are things that enterprise is going to be more focused on or is going to be leading towards, because we're a massive corporation with huge middle management. They can't be lean. And you're
it allows them to be very good at what they're doing individually, not instead of trying to be good at all, right? Like everything. So manage what you're good at and go from there and be good at just that. I think you're going to see a lot of this, but ultimately, I don't think anything changes. No. Meta still controls Facebook, and the way that Meta is going to control Facebook and Instagram and anything else that it owns. In this, GE is still going to run things like GE. This is all paperwork. This is why I say the conglomerate's not dead. Is the people that are involved in high level at GE are still going to be involved at a high level at GE. Mark Zuckerberg, or Zuckerstat, as like Danny likes to call him, right? Because he doesn't like to call any of these billionaires by their actual names.
You mean?
Exactly. Is still going to be involved in anything that he wants to be involved in, just like Bezos at Amazon and everything else. These high-level people are going to be just as involved in any of these companies as they want to be, regardless of how it's structured. It's all paperwork and liability. That's all it is.
And when he says paperwork, what he should say more accurately, it's all about shifting liabilities into silos where it's hard to. Now, I remember a situation where a friend had an issue with a car shop that messed up his car. Like legit, 2 other mechanics said, no, they screwed up your car. Now you can't drive. Really screwed. And he went to go sue them, and they said, well, technically we're incorporated in a different state, so you got to cross lines in this other state, sue us. And it's that approach. And of course, listen, I learned that lesson. I'm incorporated across several different states and other countries. Why would I be incorporated in the United States? Come sue me in Panama if you got a problem.
Well, look, all of these companies, we talked about liabilities, and you said this earlier. All of these companies are going to end up being their own publicly traded companies, right? GE Power, GE Digital, right? Whatever.
2 companies will become 5.
Right. So what they're doing is they're taking all of their liability, and we talked about this on certain companies, what we talked about going, IPO or SPAC or whatever. You have to be very careful in investing. Are you buying someone else's losses? I think in this case, it's why it's become very popular, in my opinion, for some of these big conglomerates to split up, is why take just one person's money when you can take 3 people's money with 3 different companies. And I can take all of the liability for GE or Johnson & Johnson or whatever and spread it out into these companies, and you're buying their liability into these, and they're just raising more funds. They've got 3 times the opportunity in this case to raise money in 3 different ways.
Instead of the BS being 10 inches high or 10 inches deep and an inch wide, it's going to be 10 inches wide and an inch deep. That's all they're doing.
They're just spreading their ability to make money.
It's what I would do. I don't blame them for doing this.
No.
If I was in their situation, I would also do this to the shareholder.
In today's world of how people are shoving money into the markets, and I had one company and I could fill out paperwork to take my one company and make it 3, why wouldn't I?
You'd be stupid if you didn't.